Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Dog Trainers Podcast. This is episode 6. We're excited to have you here. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 6, Sustaining Balance During the Covid-19 Lockdown.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Brent, and that's Mariano. We want to welcome you guys to episode 6 of the Dog Trainers Podcast. Now, if I'm pretty sure you guys are in the same boat as we are. Due to this coronavirus situation, we have also been put on lockdown in our own homes. As many businesses, they've had to close their doors. They've had to send employees home. So what we're doing is we are doing our best to really make sure that we can provide content and add value still to you guys, even though we are locked down to our homes. So today's episode, what we want to do is we want to actually go over some of the benefits and disadvantages of being at home alone with our dogs. We want to be able to give you guys some tips on how to capitalize on this new time that we have, this new FaceTime that we have with our pets. And we also want to warn you guys and educate you guys on potential good things and bad things that may come from this social distancing from each other. In regards to dogs. I'm not an anthropologist in regards to dogs. So stick around, guys. We can't wait to really share some of that knowledge with you. Go ahead, Mariano.
Yeah. So the way that we look at this thing, like anything, there are two sides to this coin. So there's the potential for positive, there's the potential for negative. Now, the situation we're looking at now, it's definitely a tough one. I know that we have this whole virus thing and everyone's confined to their houses. Brent's located in LA, and I know you guys are on like official lockdown for California. Mm-hmm. I'm in Arizona. We aren't, but I don't think we're far behind you. And I noticed that there's certainly a skill to being home for a while and not driving yourself insane or driving everyone else in the house insane. True. And so with people, especially just with my own family, because I'm from California, so everyone's there. With all my friends and family there, I noticed that they're kind of getting bored with themselves and getting annoyed and getting frustrated, and it's starting to show with each other. And I just want to make sure that we are as productive as possible. I understand that everybody's kind of having to make some concessions with this whole thing. And I think that the way that we can best frame this as dog trainers is to try to be as productive and as forward thinking as we can in terms of how can we absolutely maximize this time with our dogs and just make the best of a bad situation. Now, the other side of that coin is exactly that. What can we do in order to stay on top of things? This could potentially be a positive, at least from our dog's point of view, in terms of how much time they spend with us, how much direct active engagement. I mean, if a lot of people are home from work or school, then that opens up opportunities for some fun stuff.
Yeah, definitely. It opens up a lot of opportunities for teaching the dog things, for developing new routines, for working on that issue that maybe your dog has had for, so many years. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And what we want to go over today with you guys is we want to go over some of the pros and cons that may come from this lockdown and this extra time that we have with our dogs. We want to help guide you guys to understand how this could go right and how this could go wrong. And all we want is just the best for you and your dog's relationship.
Right.
All right. So let's talk about a positive. I think Mariano was alluding to it a little bit earlier. Now that we have more time at home, we can totally capitalize on this time to spend it with our dogs and do things with them, teach them skills that maybe they didn't know before. However, on the negative side, there will be a time, hopefully in the very near future, that we have to go back to work, that we can't be at home all the time. That we can't spend, so much FaceTime with our dogs or play with them or walk them every day or throw the ball every day. And unfortunately, what's going to happen is our dogs are going to get very used to it. And so when we, pack up our things and actually head back to work, there is always a risk that our dogs may develop some level of codependency, separation anxiety, over attachment to the attention that they've been receiving over the last couple of weeks. And so what we'll talk about a little bit later in the podcast is how to curb that. If you guys have listened to our episodes 4 and episode 5, we really talk a lot about structure. And in situations like this, where there's such a high saturation of attention and FaceTime with our dogs, I would recommend to go back to those videos and those episodes of the podcast to really just make sure that our structure doesn't waver as much as there's potential for that structure to really shift, and sometimes it may shift in the wrong direction. If you guys have structure, great, go ahead and keep it up. If you guys don't have structure, please take a listen to some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, because it could potentially save the relationship between you and your dog.
Yeah, it's go time, right? So it's definitely one of those things where it's great when you hear about these things or read about these things, but now is the time to practice. And of course, structure with your dog is a huge thing. Make sure that your structure with yourself is in place as well, so that you can do, even if you know how to do things with your dogs. I know that from a trainer's perspective, when, we've been doing this now for years, and I've definitely gone through those periods of time to where it's hard to get motivated. I mean, you work from home, your TV's right there, your bed is right there. So it's definitely important, I think, to at least try to come up with some semblance of structure throughout your day. And your dog can actually be a huge benefit to that. I think we were together actually before I moved out here. We were reading, ways that owning a dog can be like physically and mentally beneficial, because they get you out and they break up the monotony of a routine. And I don't think that's any truer than it is right now. And so I think it's important to absolutely maximize that time with them, and understanding that structure is a mental game. Routine is a mental game. So get up and get out and do things with them, but really delve into it. I mean, I don't want like idle hands and idle minds to drive people nuts. So make sure that you're applying yourself toward the right thing.
Right. And here's another subject that comes up, right? Some of our clients, now that, everyone's on lockdown, they can't take their dogs to daycare. Their dog walkers won't come and actually walk their dogs. They have to stay away from dog parks, as we're no longer allowed, at least in LA, we're no longer allowed to gather 10 people or more in any environment. Right. So unfortunately, what's also happening for some of those high drive dogs, those really excitable dogs, the ones, that need to burn off some energy just to feel sane. Right. These dogs are not getting that. And, if you live in an apartment or a small home, or if you don't have the yard space to actually, exercise that dog the way they're supposed to, I know that you're feeling the effects of this. However, what we want to talk about a little bit later in the podcast is talking about how we can both physically and mentally stimulate our dogs, so that way they can burn out some of that rambunctiousness a little faster.
Yeah. It's funny, when we talk about training with dogs, with or without the situation, but this situation seems to have the potential to exacerbate this kind of thing. But it seems to me, and you tell me whether or not you agree, physical energy is, of course, of high importance, but I think most people get that. And for that reason, it's not as much the culprit of bad behaviors kind of developing in a dog, because everybody knows, okay, well, I walk him, I run him. In fact, that's what they say. I really try to run him 3 miles a day, and I really can't run anymore. Like 3 miles a day times every day a week is like 20 miles a week, and I just can't do it. And he's still reactive toward blah, blah, blah. But I think it's important to point out, it tends to be, in my experience, misguided mental energy that metastasizes into bad things over time.
Yeah. Good way to put it. It pretty much they learn to take that brain energy and obsess over the wrong things. Right. And that could lead to a behavior disorder from the dog. Right. Okay. So these are some of the subjects we're going to be talking about. So let's go ahead and just dive right into it. Sure. I want to start off with saying, for those of you who already have trained your dog, wonderful. Go ahead and keep that routine. We're going to talk about balance towards the end of just this subject right here. But for those of you who maybe were used to outsourcing some of your dog's exercise, outsourcing some of your dog's mental stimulation at the dog parks or daycares, a couple of things that we would recommend for you guys is really take advantage of this time to start teaching our dogs patience, self-control, teaching them to have other hobbies than just hanging out with you. If you guys haven't listened to episode 5, we would recommend to listen to our episode 5, our top 5 tips for dog training structure. And really try and implement those things. If you guys, again, have any questions, go ahead and actually email us at our new email. It's the dogtrainerspodcast@gmail.com. And we are happy to either set up a phone call, a video conference with you guys, just to explain how you could go ahead and take advantage of it. I will also be hosting free YouTube live streams over the next couple weekends, as long as this pandemic is going on, to really guide people on how to capitalize on these issues as well. So I just want to let you guys know, we'll go ahead and put those links in the description. But that's where I would put my energy. If you guys don't have a schedule, I would work on structuring my dog's schedule, which takes time. It takes consistency. It takes repetition. And so take that as a challenge. Now, the other side of this coin, let's say you guys do have structure. Let's say you were used to having the dog walker come at a certain time, taking the dog to daycare, 3-4 times a week. One of the things that could potentially happen is your dog could get very used to the newfound FaceTime and attention that he has with you, right? A little story that I have is my own dog, Dynamite. I remember I was sick one time for about 3 to 4 days. And I spent all that time with him, and I let him, we went on walks, around the block. I let him sleep on the couch with me. I spoiled the heck out of him because I was feeling like shit and I needed some of that, emotional love from him. I would play with him, at least 3 times more than I would normally play with him a day. Just because he was literally the only person there keeping me company and hanging out with me. And it was awesome. I love the fact that he was there for me. Right. And as soon as I got better on Monday, I went back to work, and my dog for the next 2 days would whine and cry anytime he heard my voice. Right. And so what this means is this actually means he got used to having a lot of access to me. Right. He really loved that amount of time that we got to spend with each other, which, in theory, there's really nothing wrong with it. But in practicality, that stress can actually lead to other bad behaviors that our dogs might lead to. It could be excessive whining, barking. It could be anxiety that leads to destruction. It could be trying to, just there's a number of different things that the dog might do to try and get your attention simply because they like it. Right. So one of our recommendations is we really want to just make sure, because we have extra FaceTime with our dogs, let's still also try and maintain a bit of a balance with, how much of that time the dog has free access to us. Right. So if this means, we go on that mile walk or, that hour hike, whatever it might be, when you come home, give your dog some water, let them go to the yard, poop and pee, but go ahead and give them a little bit of separation and distance from you. Now, whether this is physically putting them away or you just actively engaging in something else, even if your dog is present, right? If you're working in the office, just close the door to the office and let your dog get used to just being away from you just for certain percentages of the day. So that would be my recommendation for the prevention of separation anxiety.
Yeah, 100%. And if your dog's at that place in terms of training to where you can readily expect these things. Let's say if you don't crate them or otherwise separate them from you, and instead you work something that has them actively keep distance, like a downstay or a place command, this is excellent time for you to do exactly that. Do what you got to do, catch up, clean the house, whatever it takes to be safe, look up online and find out what's going on. And when you're doing all this stuff, call your friends and family, put your dog somewhere and let them stay there. And they see you bouncing around the house and they want to engage with you, and they will throughout the day, of course, but for certain periods of time that are highly beneficial, let them learn how to be alone and be comfortable being alone. It's definitely a beneficial thing. I know it's something we talked about in last episode, but again, there's just no better time to practice this than now.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, guys, we're not saying leave your dog alone with nothing to do. Definitely give them things to do. Make sure they have a tasty chew toy with food in it, or their favorite, anything that is their favorite. Make sure that they have things to entertain themselves. So we're not saying let your dogs mope around in the laundry room, just, whining and crying and dealing with it. No, give them things to do so that way they don't forget that they have other hobbies and habits that they enjoy close to as much as you.
Yeah, the one that I learned from you that I liked a lot was take a Kong. If you have a Kong, a rubber Kong toy for the dog, put their kibble in some water so that it'll soak up and kind of blow up over time because of the water. Stuff it in the Kong toy, cap it off with whatever your dog, a bit of peanut butter or something, not like a bunch, just enough to cap so that the food doesn't fall out. And as it absorbs all that water, it gets thick. And so the dog now has to eat its way out. And let it play with that thing. Throw it in the freezer, give it to the dog when it's time, and he'll knock himself out for a good 20 minutes. And by the time he's done with it, he'll be ready for sleep.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a number of different variations of food toys, puzzles. It falls under the category of what we call food games. But yeah, check them out. Kongs, bones. Even bully sticks can be acceptable, as long as your dog's stomach can handle them. There's so many products out there. I guess, however, I would just recommend make sure you stay away from certain types of hides that can tear off and just go into the dog's stomach. So just make sure you ask your local pet store clerk what is the safest toys for your dog. All right.
100%.
All right. Now, check this out. There is another potential negative that can come from having too much face time with your dog. Okay. Again, slightly coming from my own experience, but also from tons of experience with other clients who have this problem. Based on we are home a lot more, this means we spend a lot more idle time with our dogs as well. So idle time means any time that we are not actively teaching or engaging our dogs in something productive, right? Which I honestly would say is like 90% of most owners with their dogs. So idle time means that they're just sleeping next to you. They're on the couch next to you while you're watching TV. You're eating and they're under the dinner table. That's idle time. You're not really giving the dog any instruction or feedback, but instead they are just kind of hanging out and lounging. So one thing that happens that I've noticed with a lot of my clients, when the levels of intimacy start increasing, meaning that the dog sleeps on the couch with them, the dog is constantly following them around, the dog, sleeps in bed with them a little bit more now that they're home, or let's say you're taking a nap in the middle of the day and your dog's sleeping in bed with you. What we start seeing is the dog on a very chemical level can start getting attached to being very close to you. Right? We all know the hormone oxytocin, dopamine. We all know these feel-good hormones. What happens is if we are constantly next to our dogs and touching them, stroking them, rubbing their bellies, petting them, giving them affection, again, which there's nothing wrong with at face value. But what happens is when it happens excessively, our dogs have a tendency of falling in love with the physical affection. In essence, they fall in love with us. Right. So what this has the potential to do, not only does it have the potential to increase separation anxiety, but it also has the potential for certain personalities of dogs to actually start becoming codependent on you and sometimes protective of you or possessive of you. Right. And so even though we're just enjoying our newfound vacation with our dog, we do run the risk of potentially creating an imbalance in our boundaries with the dog.
Yeah,
okay.
Imbalance is the perfect word. It's a matter of balance. I know that we might have talked about this in the past, but this is one of those things where when you talk about training a dog that tends to have these sorts of issues, or at least tends to have this sort of personality that could easily lead to these sorts of issues, the minute you start talking about structure and balance and limitations and rules, people start assuming, oh, does that mean I can't, do this and that? Can my dog not be on the couch, on the bed? And that's not the case, as long as you keep things in balance.
Right. No, exactly. There always has to be a little bit of a give and a take. Pretty much what we're trying to avoid is the dog to have an unhealthy expectation of their owner. Right. For example, in any relationship, if I expect for my girlfriend to constantly every day make me dinner all the time, and she never signed up or agreed to that, well, eventually there will be a point where, let's say I'm rude when she doesn't make me food. Right now, mind you, I do all the cooking in the relationship. This is completely a hypothetical, but the whole idea here is, unhealthy imbalance or unhealthy expectations or imbalanced expectations can be developed very easily because our dogs are creatures of habit. If we habitually give them a lot of affection and attention, eventually they will get used to it and learn to expect it. And then when we take that attention away from them, they will be upset, right? And some dogs show that upset emotion, in an outward form where they're aggressive, destructive, possessive, reactive. Some other dogs, they show that as depression, right? They will show that as depression. So every dog deals with anxiety a little bit different, but we just want to go ahead and remind you guys of those. What are some ways, some practical ways, Mariano, do you think that people could just prevent separation anxiety, prevent codependency, prevent possession and overprotection?
So some practical ways that people can go about this is, you made a great point earlier. When you spend the time with your dog that you should be spending, maybe take them for a walk or play with them in the yard or whatever it is that you're comfortable with doing, in terms of however much exposure you're looking to have in this time. Once you're done, dogs go potty, dogs get their water, they're good to go, put them away. It's okay. It's not mean of you. And it's definitely an important thing to keep in mind that boundaries are important and they're beneficial for all parties involved. So don't feel bad. I know a lot of people are like, but I'm home. Why crate my dog?
Mhm.
But it's for your dog's learning. It's to make sure that they develop the way that they should and to avoid mistakes that they would otherwise make because they're dogs and it's our job to look out for them. Another practical way would be one thing that I've had clients do in the past is when they're working their dog, we talk about, duration work, place commands, downstays, things like that while they're around. And the dog can even be, roughly in your vicinity. I mean, if you've got a little placemat in the living room, I don't mind if you're on the couch and your dog's like 5 feet away, as long as they stay put, because even though they're spending time near you, it's not so much indirect because they're currently working on a command. It may not look like much because they're laying still, but every time you get up, every time you move, and your dog has that tendency to kind of like jump up and wonder where you're going or what you're doing.
Right.
It takes practice for them to remind themselves, oh, you know what? I'm supposed to stay right here. And it keeps the relationship in a certain context of, oh, dad or mom love me very much, but I still have to listen. And expectations still are what they are.
Right. Exactly. All right. So I would agree with all of that. The key, guys, again, is balance. And it's a pretty vague term, but balance pretty much means to me, we just want to prevent our dogs from having an unhealthy expectation of the owner. That is what we're trying to say. Remember, guys, dogs are our family. We love them. But at the end of the day, our dogs need to adjust to our lifestyle as long as it's a healthy and structured one. Versus, us having to constantly cater to the dog's insecurities or issues that they may be running across, right? At any given time. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about the next subject. So as we promised, we wanted to talk about mental and physical exercise, things that you guys can do at the house, that would really help burn some of this energy. Again, this is for some of those working dogs out there, Belgian Malinois, German Shorthair Pointers, and here's the funny thing. It's not a specific type of breed. It's a specific personality.
Right.
Let me go ahead and just take the time real quick to define what we consider to be a working dog, and please chime in anytime you want.
Sure.
So a working dog, in the scale of dog training, there is one side that is an assessment of intelligence. And we define intelligence as the dog's ability to use their senses to adapt and survive in the world around them. Right. So these are dogs who have great survival and adaptation instincts. Right. This is the dog that you tried to crate train him. You left, you came back, you see him sleeping on the couch, and you still see that the crate door is locked.
Right.
and you're like, how the hell did that happen? Or that dog that, is a ninja. And as soon as you turn your back, he snatched that steak off the counter. And you turn your back and all you see is a bone, right? It's this dog who is an amazing assessor of behavior, and they're constantly learning from the environment and learning how to adapt and survive in it. Okay. On the other hand, we have what is called trainability. So trainability is how motivated our dogs are to learn tasks for specific items, right? So if I have a dog who really loves a tennis ball, right? Well, that means I can use that tennis ball in training. If I have a dog who really likes food, which is a majority of dogs, then I can use food in training. If I have a dog who really likes to work for affection, well, I can use that motivator as a form of praise or reinforcement in training. So pretty much the more things my dog likes to work, like if my dog has multiple levels of currency, this is what we call a trainable dog. This is super trainable, right? Now, a working dog is a pretty darn good balance of the two. A dog who is very intelligent and can think on his own and survive and adapt. And on the other hand, we have a dog who is also very motivated. So on average, you will see a traditional working dog who is really good to be left on its own, and very smart to figure stuff out. But at the same time, they love tennis ball, tug of war. They love treats. They love humans. They love this and this and that, right? So the idea is you have a very driven, intelligent dog. And that's what we consider to be a working dog. So if this type of dog is yours, well, I hate to say it, guys, having a smart kid means they're harder to raise. Right. So what we're going to work with, and as my mentor used to say, everybody wants a smart kid and a smart dog until they get one. Right. Right. Until they're teenagers. So what we're going to put focus on is mental and physical exercise, and how you can use them together. All right. So mental stimulation, again, is from our previous episodes, is controlling the dog's focus. What is the dog able to focus on at any given time? And physical exercise is obviously how much energy the dog can expel. So let's talk about a couple of exercises that are pretty simple, right? If your dog already has a foundation of obedience, right? And we'll talk if your dog doesn't have a foundation of obedience. But if your dog does already have a foundation of obedience, one really great mental exercise is going to be the development of distraction work and stays. Okay. So what I would recommend if your dog does know how to stay, I would start bringing out treats, for example, and I would throw those treats about, 6 to 8 feet away from the dog and insist that my dog stays. Now, if your dog gets up, block your dog from going to get that treat and make him start over until he starts understanding the condition. Okay. Now, what happens is through this process of trial and error, your dog is now forced to think, how in the heck do I get this darn treat? Right. And through this process, your dog starts burning what we call brain calories, right? Or brain energy. And it's very similar to when you work on an essay or if you work on a hard project at work, 2 or 3 hours of hard focus and problem solving and trying to think rationally really burns you out, where by the time you get to your lunch break, you're like, oh man, I need to leave work because it's too much. Right. So this is part of our goal. Now, teaching our dogs to have self-control, and not only does it develop a better angle in our relationship or a better side to our relationship, but it forces our dogs to now think rationally versus impulsively. And so this type of game, we call these hold and releases, where we tell our dogs to stay. We throw something of value in front of the dog. We make sure that dog holds, and then we release it at a random interval. So we're teaching two things. We're teaching to stay, or we're teaching to hold. And then the second thing we're teaching is permission to actually go get the thing that we want the dog to have. Right. So this is one form of mental stimulation. Any other forms of mental stimulation you could think of?
Yeah. So we talked about it in a few other episodes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Distraction work is a huge one, but there's also the other two Ds, distance and duration. Now, we talked about duration a little earlier in the podcast. So I think distance is a huge one because mental energy, of course, is huge, but physical energy, especially with, like a Malinois, GSP, GSD, and things like that, there. A great way that I like to work both mental and physical energy is to do kind of a combination of distance and distraction work. So it would be something like what I notice a lot of times in these working dogs, and you said it a little while ago, was they do have a kind of hierarchy of what they prioritize in terms of a reward. So they like food, but they love a tug toy type thing. So if that's the case with your dog, or vice versa, whatever the dog likes more, you can use that as the ultimate distraction and the ultimate reward. Yeah. So an example being, I'll take the dog, put him in a downstay, reward him with some food, give him the command to stay, walk far away, however big the yard is, or, a good 20, 30 feet, however long your long leash is if you're not in a yard. Now, I'll take a ball or whatever the case, throw it somewhere, dog's not allowed to move. So it's that same sort of concept. But then once they are, you release, boom, and the dog flies, burning all that mental energy. After the reward, they grab it, you tug with them, same thing, work it back and forth. And so you're working not only the distraction downstay, but also the long distance recall. Let the dog get some running done while they're at it.
Yep. And that is actually an extension of the hold and release. That's actually what they teach hunting dogs in the hunting discipline. So that's actually really awesome. I think adding that dynamic of the highest value, reinforcer, that's super cool, right? So just to reiterate what he said, anything that the dog finds the most highly valuable, be it the tug toy, a squeaker, it could just be your affection or a piece of food. You're going to have that at the end of the situation. Now, this actually opens me up to the very, very next thing that I was going to talk about, which is actually we can take these two modules we just set up, the very basic hold and release and the hold release at a distance. And we can actually turn this into a really fun game that we all know as hide and seek. Okay. So a really cool thing for kids to play with their dogs, especially if they have a good downstay or a sit stay. And you know what? It's not just kids. It's adults too. It's pretty freaking fun.
I was going to say,
kids, right? If you guys have that squeaker ball, put it in your pocket. If you guys have a handful of hot dogs that your dogs really like, put it in your pocket. Tell your dog to down and stay or sit and stay somewhere else in the room and go and hide. Now, at first, just like any game, make sure the first couple rounds are pretty easy. So that way it builds motivation for the dog to try harder in the harder rounds. But so maybe just like go to the next room and hide behind the doorway. And then what I want you guys to do when you're out of sight and in the other room, you're just going to go ahead and release the dog and say, okay, come and find me. Then you will see that your dog breaks the command, goes into the other room where he saw you enter, and sniff around, sniff around, sniff around, sniff around. Now, when that dog finds you behind that door, behind the couch, wherever it is that you happen to be, I want you guys to say, oh, what a good boy, and load him up with whatever the heck the reinforcer is. So if he likes tug toys, you should tug for at least 20, 30 seconds. If it's food, give him make it rain hot dogs if that's what you have. Pretty much just let him know what a good boy you found me, and then you jackpot that dog in some way, shape, or form. Then what you do is then you gradually make that game harder. Go to the second room, hide in the closet, go under the bed. And then you can really, like when dogs get really good at this, guys, you guys got to remember dogs have a really awesome sense of smell. So in essence, you're kind of doing hide and seek and scent work a little bit at the same time. Right. So that's pretty cool. Now, speaking of scent work, there's so many YouTube videos out there to just learn how to do the basic fundamentals of scent work. I actually would recommend it. Go out there, practice with that a little bit. And you can even practice teaching your dogs to find things that aren't you.
Yeah, 100%. Well, a fun thing that I like to do once the dogs get good enough, because Simba, one of my dogs, is pretty good at that. And the way that I built him up was doing it with the ball, but without me necessarily being attached to it. So I downstay him, throw the ball somewhere like in tall grass, and he has to go and find it. When he got better, I would do that sort of thing in the house, only I would take it everywhere. So the scents in all the rooms and then put it somewhere. And I'd see him kind of bumble around from door to door and finally find it, at which point then you jackpot the dog, reset.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love that. Now, why is this better than maybe, other games that we might be able to play? It's not, it's better in some ways that this is highly focused mental stimulation. So mental stimulation is getting our dogs to learn to use the rational parts of their brain, the parts of their brain that understand cause and effect, the parts of their brain that think of risk and reward, right? Those parts of their brain that are constantly thinking versus the animalistic impulsive side of their brain, which is constantly just go, 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 go. Okay. One side of the brain is pretty stimulating and reinforcing. The other one has to be very tactical and think about the structure and pros and cons of what they're doing. So if we can get our dogs to think more rationally and think to solve problems, we can burn out their energy so much more. And this is why maybe if you guys have ever had a dog trainer before, they actually tell you 20 to 30 minutes of obedience training is tiring to a dog than an hour to an hour and a half walk. And
100%.
I've trained thousands of dogs, and I definitely concur that is the truth. That as soon as if you have a good 20, 30 minute training session with the dog, that dog will pass out when you're done with him.
I tell people that I love telling people that. And especially again, when you're working with highly energetic, potentially reactive dogs that just have no focus and they can run and, go nuts all day long. And we do a lesson or a walk and the dog is out. And I'm like, yeah, it's fun, right? It's easy.
Right. It's awesome. It's really awesome. Okay. So that's mental stimulation, anything that gets our dogs to control themselves and think rationally. Let's see. Other forms of mental stimulation could also be bones, right? And we talked about that in the previous one, the prevention of separation anxiety. If you're able to use food puzzles and bones a little bit better, sometimes they have these toys. I know one of my dog's favorites is the Kong Wobbler. The Kong Wobbler is one of those food dispensing toys that the dog hits it and a piece of food pops out. And depending on your dog's food drive, this could be a really, really fun puzzle, an exciting kind of reinforcement loop that the dog goes through to the point where they can actually become obsessed with this kind of stuff. So just keep that in mind. It's really fun for them. Let's see. What else? That's all I can think of right now in regards to mental stimulation. So let's go ahead and talk about a little bit of physical exercise that can actually be done in the house.
Yeah. Obedience drills, I think. If you have a pool, let the dog swim. If you have a yard, let the dog run. And, it's a funny thing when people who have a lot of space, they kind of assume that the dog knows how to utilize that space. Sometimes I guess the dogs will have like the zoomies and jump everywhere and run everywhere. But most of the time, they'll probably just hang out by the door. So make sure you go outside with them and run them, work them, let them have a little fun with you and wear themselves out. It's super easy on your part because of what's going on right now. If you really don't want to, there are definitely things you can do to exercise your dog without going outside.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely, I want to make sure that you're aware enough to be able to take advantage of that kind of thing. And if you do want to, if you're a daredevil, then hey, go for a walk.
Right. One thing that I think would always be really fun, physically exhausting, is if we can teach our dogs to jump over things. That's always really, really fun. If you get a little tiny obstacle, could be, a stack of wood. It could be something that where the dog has to go over it in order to get some type of food reward. Jumping gets the dogs a lot more tired than let's just the casual walking, right? If we can mix some type of walking, running, jumping, for something, then the dog will physically get a lot more tired. I love that you said pool. That's really cool. If your dog knows how to swim, yeah, totally use your pool, even though in some parts of the country it's pretty cold. But maybe your dog doesn't care. Who knows?
Yeah, my dog doesn't care.
Yeah, maybe their dog doesn't care. Other things that I would recommend to do for physical exercise, I would say a high percentage of dogs don't know how to completely play certain games like fetch, tug of war, frisbee, things like that. So I would take advantage of this time to finish teaching the dogs those games. Right. So just kind of to recap a little bit of information that we went over from our last episode, we talked about positive feedback loops, or what I call reinforcement loops. And this is ultimately what a game is. Okay. What we'll do is we'll break it down. Behavior A leads to behavior B, which is coupled by behavior C. Right. So this usually means, let's say you look at the game of fetch. I throw the ball. The dog grabs the ball. The dog brings the ball back. And that is linked together by the dog giving the ball back to me, right? So all three of those things have to happen in sequence in order for the game of fetch to exist, right? If we look at any other sport that has to do with competitors against each other, we see that, a basketball player has to take the basketball down court. He has to shoot that basketball. He has to either miss or make that basketball, and then the basketball goes back to the other side of the court, and this process is repeated back and forth. And so what we want to challenge you guys, if you guys don't know how to teach your dogs certain games, I want you to first identify what part of this reinforcement loop actually needs to be worked on. Okay, so there are situations where, let's take the game of fetch or frisbee again, the dog just doesn't chase the item, okay? But maybe your dog does like to chase things, maybe just doesn't like to chase that ball. Okay. What we would do is we would start teaching the dog to chase things that they like. It could be a piece of food. It could be a bone. It could be a rope. It could be a squeaky toy. We have to find something that the dog does like, and we're going to start teaching our dogs to chase that individual thing in the first place. Okay. Let's say behavior B, bringing the toy back to you, is an issue. What we're going to do is we actually put our dogs on leashes. If your dog's good at behavior A, then we're going to put our dogs on long leashes. And those long leashes are going to allow us to guide the dogs to come back towards our directions versus doing what commonly happens, where dogs will take a ball and go hide that ball somewhere off in the corner somewhere. Okay.
Or play keep away.
Or they play keep away, or they go to their crates or their den areas and they just kind of nest and possess them a little bit, right? So the leash is just going to be there as a tool so you can gently guide the dog into your direction to teach them position B, all right, or behavior B. Now, behavior C, this is the most commonly not done well. The dog, I know so many people, the dog chases the ball, brings the ball back, but the dog does not let the ball go or the item go. This is where we have to teach our dogs a release, a drop it, or an out command, depending on what word you use. The point is the dog has to let go of the toy in order for the cycle to begin again. All right. Now, the common ones again are frisbee, fetch, tug of war, those types of things. Even if you throw the tug toy, the dog should bring the tug toy back to you. It's all the same concepts. But this way, this is how we can actually get our dogs physically exhausted without us having to do a lot of energy. Now, it may take a little bit of time to develop this, but guess what, guys? We're home, so all we have is time. All right. One more thing I would recommend, if you guys have ever heard of a flirt pole before, a flirt pole with dogs, if you guys have a dog with a high predatory drive, I would always recommend to own a flirt pole. The cool thing is flirt poles you can put You can put different attachments at the end. For those of you who don't know, who are listening, who don't know what a flirt pole is, a flirt pole is a giant cat toy for dogs. So it's some type of rod with a rope, and there is some type of toy attached to the end of that rope. So if you guys can imagine one of those cute little cat toys with the little feathers and bells at the end, they make dog versions of those known as flirt poles. If you guys go on Amazon, you guys will see 4, 5, 6 different types of flirt poles that you could order, and they'll be in your house in Amazon Prime in 2 days. So go ahead and check those out. If your dog likes to chase and tug on things, your dog will love that stinking flirt pole. All right. And this is a great way of getting your dogs tired while you're just standing in place. So this is awesome. Cool. Any recommendations you have, my friend?
Yeah, I think I really like the flirt pole idea. I think that too. My favorite thing to do when playing with your dog is to sprinkle a little obedience in there, because it works the mental aspect of it along with the physical a bit more than just play. Mm-hmm. And they don't really realize that they're working because they're having too much fun. So I'd be spinning in circles, with the flirt pole, dogs chasing around, and right in the middle, down, boom.
Right.
And start to work that as the flirt pole keeps going away from the dog. And so the dog is tempted, and then you release, and continue. Just a quick tip when trying to build fetch. A couple ways that I've seen people go about it is if your dog is a little further on in their obedience journey and they know a recall, throw the ball or the frisbee or whatever the case. Once the dog grabs it, try a really fun, really playful recall. Come here, puppy, and try to get the dog to come back to you while they still have it in their mouth.
Right.
One thing that I did with my dog, who really likes tennis balls, is I would throw the ball, he'd grab it, and his out command was good. So once he got to me, he would release it, but he wouldn't quite come back to me, or at least not with enough energy. So I'd throw him a ball, he'd go and find it, pick it up, and I'd say, Simba, come. And he stares at me but I already have the ball. Mm-hmm. And I would show him another tennis ball, and he's like, oh, and then he'd head right back to me. So it's helpful if you have another, or something like that to kind of coax the dog.
Some other type of lure. Yeah, some other type of lure. It could be another ball. It could also be food in your hand. Right. There's so many different things. We might have to actually show you guys a video at some point of shaping the fetch or shaping the release or something like that. But yeah, that's ultimately the gist of it. Cool. Let's see. Physical exercise. Those are definitely things you guys can do in your house. Now, let's say you don't want to go outside. Let's say it's raining, the weather's bad, or you live too close to neighbors. Teaching your dog to do some of this stuff inside of your house. Teaching your dog to jump over your couch. Teaching your dog to jump over a kitchen table chair. Teaching your dog to jump on the bed, jump off the bed. Again, these are all opportunities. Now, a lot of times people are going to go, they're going to say, hey, well, I thought my dog's not supposed to be on the bed, or I thought my dog's not supposed to be on the couch, or I thought my dog's not supposed to do all these things. Well, here's the funny thing. If we teach our dogs to do it on command, then we can actually teach our dogs to not do it on command.
On command, right.
Makes sense. So this is a concept in dog training we call putting it on cue. And so if, for example, if my dog likes to jump on people, I actually teach the dog to jump up on me for fun so that I can teach him to get off of me really quickly. Right. Or if my dog doesn't know how to get off the couch, I'll teach my dog to jump on the couch, and then I'll teach him to get off the couch just as quickly. So we start creating these games. Again, they are positive feedback loops or reinforcement loops that the dog learns, behavior A leads to behavior B, which leads to, some type of reinforcement that I like.
Yeah. Context matters. So even if you're doing something with your dog that you quote unquote think you shouldn't be doing, right, as long as the dog is clear about what's going on, then they'll adapt with you. Dogs are very smart, and they're very willing to do what you want them to do. They want to please you. That's why they're our best friends.
Right.
So, I even do things with I'll grapple. I love wrestling with my dogs. It's not a problem as long as when I say, okay, get off of me, then they're off. And it's great. It's good physical exercise for them. It's relatively easy for me to not get too scratched up because I just kind of hold them with my legs or whatever the case. And then, once we're done, we're done. And it's just good practice because now that they're all excited because dad was just on the floor, then they get to go lay down and practice calming down, at which point I release them and the cycle continues.
Right. Exactly. All righty. So I think that kind of just brings us to the end of this podcast. Anything you want to say, Mariano?
Yeah, let me just finish with this before we finish this up for good. Is
sure.
With all of this advice that we've been giving and all of the stress and all of the weariness surrounding this whole situation, which I get, we're not separated from this whole thing either.
Right.
Keep an end goal in mind. So when you're working with your dogs, when you're working with yourself, when you're trying to keep your routine in place and not go nuts because you're bored at home, understand that this isn't going to last forever. I mean, as far as I understood, in China, it's already kind of on its way out. So we're going to be there pretty soon, God willing, within the next couple months.
Right.
Keep the end goal in mind, especially in the days or the times throughout the day where you're feeling most kind of sunk into this this boring kind of sedentary lifestyle.
Right.
It's coming soon, and don't lose sight of the importance that we were talking about in terms of being willing to separate your dogs from you, because again, you may be home all the time right now, but don't set them up for failure based on something that's temporary.
Right. And take action now, guys. I mean, we don't know how long this is going to be, but really take action with your dogs. And if any of this is interesting to you, and as Mariano said, set that end goal. And I set that end goal definitely, and things that you may want to achieve also with your dogs, for sure. Cool. Anything else you want to say, man?
No, just keep up with it, man. Keep up with your workouts. Keep up with whatever you do. Keep up with your dog. Life's going to continue. Keep your head up.
Yeah. And really, really try and find the light at the end of this tunnel, guys, because at the end of the day, stressing out doesn't help anybody, doesn't help your immune systems, doesn't help our dogs, because remember, our dogs are always looking to us for leadership. So if we're freaking out or scared, we're not doing them a service either.
Right.
Okay. Cool, guys. All right. Again, my name is Brent LaBrada, and that's Mariano Alvarez. We're going to go ahead and leave our new email down here. It's the dogtrainerspodcast@gmail.com. If you guys have any questions or subject matters that you'd like us to discuss, go ahead and please write us, and we'd be happy to make that some subjects in our next upcoming videos. Those of you guys who are into social media, go ahead and follow us on our Instagrams. It's going to be our social media is I'm at CANISBEHAVIOR, and Mariano is UNTAMEDDOGCO. That's Untamed DOGCO. On Instagram. So go ahead and follow us, guys. Reach out to us. We would love to chat and hear from you guys. All right. We hope you guys are having a really, really safe and healthy lockdown. Please share this video if you guys find it of value or useful to someone that you might be around you. All right. You guys take care, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.